The Wyoming heat shimmered over the land like liquid fire, and the only sound was the low creak of saddle leather as Luke Morgan guided his horse down the dusty trail. He'd been driving cattle all morning, but something strange tugged at his senses, an uneasy stillness that didn't belong to the prairie. Then he heard it. A faint whimper carried on the wind. Luke froze, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the endless horizon. Nothing, just sand, sagebrush, and the whisper of the desert. But when the cry came again, broken and soft, he turned his horse toward it without hesitation. The trail led him to an old fence post, half rotted and weathered by storms. There, in the punishing sunlight, a woman was tied, her dress torn, her skin burned red, her hair tangled with dust. Luke's breath caught. He leapt off his horse and knelt beside her, cutting the rough rope that had bitten deep into her wrists. Her body trembled as she sagged forward into his arms. For a moment, she didn't speak, only breathed raggedly, as if every inhale hurt. "You're safe now," Luke murmured, pouring water from his canteen into her cracked lips. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing a storm of fear and strength. "Who did this to you?" Luke asked, his voice steady but low. She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the horizon, where dust swirled faintly in the distance. "Men from my camp," she whispered. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to." Luke's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough frontier cruelty to know what that meant. He looked around. The wind had already erased any tracks. Whoever had done this was long gone, or maybe watching from somewhere nearby. He kept his hand close to his revolver. As he lifted her onto his horse, the woman's strength gave out again. She leaned against him, her voice barely audible. "My name's Ilara," she said. The name lingered in the air like a secret. Luke nodded, tightening his hold, as his horse began its slow, steady walk back to his cabin beyond the ridge. Every step felt heavy with tension, the sun sinking lower, shadows growing longer across the sand. Somewhere behind them, a hawk cried, a sound that made Luke's instincts flare. He didn't believe in coincidences. Whoever had left this woman to die wouldn't just let her disappear. By the time they reached his small homestead, the light had turned amber. Luke carried Ilara inside, setting her gently on the worn cot by the window. He soaked a cloth in cool water and cleaned her wrists, the red marks vivid against her skin. "They said I was a traitor," she murmured, staring into the fading light. "But I only wanted to leave." Her words came haltingly, as if each one carried a memory she didn't want to recall. Luke didn't press her. The West was full of people running from something, the law, the past, or themselves. He wasn't one to judge. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the dry grass and creaking the barn door. Luke struck a match and lit a lantern, the warm glow pushing back the night. "You'll be safe here," he said, though even as he spoke, he wasn't sure he could promise that. Ilara looked at him then, her dark eyes searching his face as if weighing whether to trust him. Finally she nodded, whispering, "Thank you." Luke turned away to tend the fire, trying not to notice the ache in his chest when he heard the quiet tremor in her voice. Later, as the desert night settled heavy and silent, Luke sat outside with his rifle resting across his knees. The stars were bright, sharp as broken glass. He'd been alone for years, ever since he'd left the army and the wars that still haunted his sleep. Saving strangers wasn't something he planned on doing again, but something about Ilara stirred a part of him he thought had died. Behind him, through the open cabin window, he could hear her breathing, slow and steady. The sound should have been comforting, but instead it made him restless. Someone out there wanted her gone. The next morning came cold and pale. Ilara awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a horse's soft snort. Luke stood by the door, silhouetted against the dawn. "You're awake," he said quietly. "You should eat." She sat up, brushing her tangled hair back. "You should have left me," she replied, her tone strange, half warning, half gratitude. Luke shook his head. "I've done enough leaving in my life." Ilara's lips curved faintly, though her eyes stayed shadowed. "Then you don't know what you've stepped into," she said, and for the first time, fear flickered in her voice. Before he could ask what she meant, a sound echoed in the distance, a faint rumble like hooves. Luke stiffened. He walked out to the porch, scanning the horizon. 3 riders, just dots now, moving slow and deliberate across the open land. His gut tightened. "Friends of yours?" he called back to Ilara. She stepped to the doorway, pale and silent. "No," she whispered. Luke grabbed his rifle and turned toward her. "Then we've got company," he said. For a long moment they stood there, side by side, the morning light breaking over the land that suddenly felt far too small for both safety and truth. As the riders drew closer, Luke's mind raced. Whoever these men were, they weren't coming for a friendly talk. Ilara's hands trembled slightly, but her eyes, those eyes, held something fierce beneath the fear. "You could still walk away," she said. "They want me, not you." Luke chambered around and gave her a half-smile. "Ma'am, I've never been good at walking away." The riders came into focus, hard men with rifles across their saddles. The same kind of men Luke had fought beside once, long ago. Now they were the enemy. He looked at Ilara and nodded. "Stay low," he said. "It's about to start." The firelight flickered against the canyon walls, painting gold and shadow across Luke's weathered face. Ilara sat close to the flames, her knees drawn to her chest, staring into the sparks, as if searching for something buried deep within. The night around them was still, broken only by the distant cry of a coyote and the whisper of wind moving through sagebrush. Luke poured her a tin cup of coffee and slid it toward her. "You need to keep your strength," he said. She nodded faintly but didn't drink. Her eyes glimmered with pain that no warmth could touch. "They killed my brother," she said finally, her voice trembling like the wind. "And blamed me." Luke froze, his hand tightening around the handle of his cup. The fire popped, sending a spark into the dark. He'd heard stories like this before, men doing evil and twisting truth to bury it, but something in her tone cut deeper than any tale. "Why would they blame you?" he asked softly. Ilara turned toward him, the firelight reflecting off her tear-streaked cheeks. "Because I found out what they were hiding. I saw the map." She hesitated. "A trail of gold that wasn't meant to be found." Luke leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "A gold trail?" The words felt heavy, dangerous. Ilara nodded slowly. "My brother worked for them. Prospectors, trappers, thieves, whatever they called themselves. He found a vein of gold along the Red Mesa cliffs. He wanted to share it with the tribe, make peace, build something good." Her eyes dimmed. "But they wanted it for themselves. They killed him when he refused to reveal the exact location." Her hands tightened around the cup. "And when I tried to stop them, they said I was his accomplice. They left me tied to that post, to die quietly." Luke stared into the fire, the heat doing little to thaw the chill crawling up his spine. "You've been running ever since," he murmured. Ilara nodded. "Yes, but I wasn't just running from them. I was running from the truth. From the part of me that believed I could ever be safe again." Her voice cracked, and for a long while neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of ghosts, of things lost and things that might yet be found. Luke tossed another branch into the fire, the embers rising like stars. "Then we ride at dawn," he said quietly. Ilara looked up sharply. "Ride where?" "To the cliffs," he replied. "If there's truth to your story, someone has to make it right." She stared at him in disbelief. "You'd risk your life for something that isn't yours?" He met her gaze evenly. "I'd risk it to stop men like that. I've seen too many get away with it." There was steel in his tone, but behind it a quiet compassion. Ilara's eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, the fear in her melted into something else, something warmer. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Luke smiled faintly. "I know enough." The next morning dawn broke red and wild across the Montana sky. The fire had long burned out, but the air still smelled of smoke and coffee. Luke saddled his horse, while Ilara packed the small bundle of supplies. Her movements were steady, her face calm, but her heart thundered beneath her ribs. "You sure about this?" Luke asked, checking his rifle. "They'll be expecting you to run, not to ride straight into their trail." She lifted her chin. "If I keep running, I'll never stop." That was enough for him. Without another word, he helped her into the saddle, and they rode east. The landscape rolled before them, endless and golden beneath the rising sun. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the rhythmic beat of hooves. Somewhere along the way, Ilara began to hum a song, a quiet tune, haunting and beautiful. Luke glanced at her, recognizing the melody. "That's an old war song," he said. "My mother used to sing it," she replied. "She said it was for those who fought not with guns, but with courage." Luke smiled faintly. "Seems fitting." The trail wound higher into the red cliffs, where shadows stretched long and the wind carried whispers of stories untold. By midday, they reached the edge of the mesa. Below, a dry riverbed wound like a scar across the land. Ilara pointed toward a cluster of rocks near the canyon wall. "That's where they found the gold." Luke dismounted and crouched beside the stones. They shimmered faintly with flecks of yellow, just enough to prove her truth. But as he examined the ground, fresh hoofprints caught his eye, too fresh. His gut tightened. "We're not alone," he said. Ilara's face went pale. Before she could respond, a voice called from behind them. "You should have stayed dead, girl." 3 riders appeared at the ridge, rifles glinting in the sun. Luke stood slowly, his revolver already drawn. "Looks like you boys made a long ride," he said coolly. The leader sneered. "Not long enough to miss the party." Ilara stepped closer to Luke, fear flashing in her eyes, but he gave a small shake of his head. "Stay behind me." The men dismounted, circling like wolves. The leader spat. "You don't know what you're protecting, cowboy. There's more gold here than you can dream of." "Step aside." Luke's voice hardened. "There's not enough gold in this world to buy a soul." The first shot rang out sharp as thunder. Dust exploded at Luke's feet. He fired back, dropping one man before diving behind a boulder. Ilara crouched low, her breath coming fast. The leader cursed, firing again, the bullet grazing Luke's arm. "You can't win!" the man shouted. Luke gritted his teeth, reloading. "Wasn't planning to win," he muttered. "Just planning to end this." With a final surge, he stepped out, fired 2 clean shots, and silence fell. Smoke drifted in the air, heavy and still. The leader fell last, his rifle slipping from his hand as he hit the dust. Ilara rushed to Luke's side, her hands shaking as she pressed against his wound. "You're hurt," she said. "Not bad enough to stop me," he replied with a strained grin. She laughed softly through tears. Around them the desert stretched quiet and endless, as if holding its breath. The gold in the rocks glimmered faintly beneath the sunlight, beautiful but meaningless now. Ilara looked at it, then at Luke. "It's cursed," she whispered. "No," he said gently. "It's just gold. It's what people do for it that's cursed." She nodded, her gaze lingering on him, filled with something pure, a quiet gratitude, maybe even love. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned to fire, they buried the fallen men beneath the cliffs. Ilara placed a stone over the last grave and whispered a prayer in her mother's tongue. Luke stood beside her, hat in hand, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. When she turned to him, her eyes glowed with new strength. "What now?" she asked softly. Luke looked out across the horizon, the wind tugging at his coat. "Now," he said, "we start living for real." And as they rode away into the fading light, the gold behind them lost its shine. Forever.